Hey, good morning. And it is the weekend after Thanksgiving, and I still fit into my clothes. Dr. Burris, Dr. Kim, thank you for joining us today on Your Personal Health. And we're taking baby steps again. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Yeah. Did you have a nice Thanksgiving weekend?
Yes, it was busy, but um, good overall. Yeah,
Now, when you say busy, was it busy personally or professionally or both?
both. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're pretty busy.
Is this a busy time for you as primary care physicians typically?
Yes, going into the season here in the Coachella Valley when we have more people in town, tends to just sort of make everything a little busier as far as everything takes a little bit more time. But there's also more events to go to, more things happening in our social lives or personal lives. There's holiday parties. There's also increased demand on professional levels because we are moving into cold and flu season. We still have COVID going on, and as far as our practice, we also have our out of town visitors coming back. So it's a really good and happy season, and just a little busier than summer.
Gotcha. Hey, before we get into today's topic, I wanted to ask you a question because it just came up over the weekend about a new strain of the COVID out of Africa, South Africa. I know this is very much left field for you, so I don't expect to have specific data on this as you would with the show we had for, gosh, 18 months, whatever, how long period it was. But what's your thought on that particular new strain?
The strain was named Omicron, which is very science fictiony sounding, honestly. But um, the next letter up in the Greek alphabet was Nu, and Nu sounds too much like new, and
Mhm.
so they decided to skip it and they went with Omicron. So this strain looks like it's a significantly different strain. It has over 20 new mutations on the spike protein, and that's why it's a variant of concern, because South Africa had a fairly low rate of transmission, and then in a matter of a week, it went up by about 400%.
Wow.
So they were like, Johannesburg was going from like 400 cases. The next day they had 1,200 cases. The next day they had like 2,500 cases. And so they were exponentially increasing, which told them they had something new happening. So they found the new variant. Um, South Africa, however, has a very low vaccination rate. It's under 25%.
Mm.
So what's not known yet, and we'll know in about a week, is whether or not people's vaccine antibodies are going to be very effective against this new strain. The thoughts are that it likely will have some protection, but that data should be available in the next week or so. The other thing that's not yet known is whether this actually causes more severe disease, which is the other major player. Is this going to cause an increase in hospitalization?
Mm.
And B, does it in overall uh, escape vaccine more than Delta, for instance? And again, because hospitalizations lag cases, we actually probably won't know the answer to that question for about a month.
Wow.
So it can be very frustrating for people. You hear about this new strain, you want all the answers. Um, what we do know is that it is spread the same way. So all the things that we were doing before, the social distancing and the masking and staying home when you're sick and getting tested, our current tests pick it up very nicely. It's
Mm.
not like it's going to be missed on a test. So if you're sick or you have some symptoms, get tested, stay home, and wear your mask in public settings. I think especially as we're moving into the winter with more indoor events happening, this is probably going to be important. This is a really transmissible strain. It looks like, data wise, that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 times more transmissible than the original alpha strain or original strain.
Wow.
So it's much more transmissible than Delta. It replaced Delta in South Africa in a matter of a week, which was crazy. Delta replaced the alpha strain here. It took about 6 weeks, just to give you an example. So that's what we know so far.
Right. And Delta is still here, though. That's, even though many people aren't getting sick, there are still a few, and we know of 2 people that are hospitalized still with COVID, and we've had a couple of patients who had to go through side effects from COVID and get admitted. So it's not that.
Yeah, Delta's not gone, and in some regions of the United States, they're still in a surge. But currently here, we're sort of slowly plateauing out after Delta. And it's just a matter of time before this new strain comes. It should be here sometime in the next 1 to 2 months.
It seems like right away, many governments around the world decided, hey, we're going to at least try to put a ban on transportation. I know the U.S. banned flights coming in and out of South Africa, trying to get ahead of this. We hope that will help, but I know there's a few cases out there that have already made it to other European countries, even though they were unexpected. So yeah, it's nice to walk around, quite honestly, and see people still wearing their mask, especially when they're, I'm going to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever that might be. And there's a lot of people out there wearing masks. I think for me personally, I realize why wouldn't I want to wear it almost all the time when I'm out and about? It seemed to keep that whole cold and flu season at bay while it was helping me against COVID. So I appreciate you kind of filling us in on this. So let's break out into what we want to talk about today. And as I said, we're talking about baby steps, and really the parents that have that newborn, maybe on the way, or from newborn to about 6 months of the kind of things. And in the past, the last few weeks, we've been talking about, hey, what you can expect, and you as a parent and the baby and that type of stuff, and realizing, hey, you're not going to be perfect. And some of this is you're learning as you go, but there are also some opportunities for you to learn while you're here today. And I really want to point out with those people that are joining us just now that we're talking about baby steps, and this is an open forum for you to ask Dr. Burris and Dr. Kim specific questions if you are a parent and you do experience some of the things like whatever it may happen. And I wanted to ask you guys today some questions that, not because I want to be careful with this, because as you said, the parent can get overwhelmed with their finger on the internet, that it looks like the baby blinked the wrong number of times, and boy, I better check that on the internet. And so I want to be careful about that, but I also want to engage people if they are in that stage and something comes up, that they can ask that question. And I'm just curious, in that first, I'm going to say 0 to 6 months, what kind of things are typical? We may not think of them as normal as parents, because it would probably make us, the hair on the neck stand up and worry and call 911. But what are some of the things that are somewhat normal that a parent might expect from a newborn in that first 6 months that we should just be aware of?
I'll let Dr. Burris start.
We'll start with spitting up or vomiting. And most of the time, if you feed a baby, burp them well and don't overfeed them, they may not spit up. But truth be told, if they're real hungry, they may swallow a bunch of air. And some of that air is in there and comes up as a big burp, and some formula comes up with that, or some milk. Um, and that can be really disconcerting, especially if you're having any difficulties feeding a baby and you're looking at a significant amount of milk that came back up, even though you've spent a lot of time and effort getting it back down. So that can be very stressful. Also, you may be concerned early on that the baby's spitting up too much, or spitting up their whole feeding. And sometimes it can be hard to tell how much the baby's actually eating. Um, and so there are some ways for people to know whether or not their baby is spitting up too much. And the most important way is to see how the baby's growing. And that you can do with your pediatrician, especially in those first few weeks. Um, you can actually weigh the baby more often than, you know, just at a well child check. You can actually bring the baby in and weigh them every week just to make sure that they're growing appropriately. Also, often if babies are breastfeeding, it can be hard to know how much they're drinking. And so in that case, you can actually weigh the baby first, have the baby feed, and then weigh the baby again and see how many ounces they took in. And that can help allay people's fears, because some babies eat very quickly and some babies eat very slowly. And if you think that your baby was supposed to eat for 15 minutes on each side for a total of 30 minutes, and they're done after 7 minutes, you may worry that they didn't get enough milk. And then when they throw up some, you may not know, did they get any? So those early weeks, often you need to work with a lactation consultant or with your pediatrician to make sure that the baby's growing, because that spitting up and that vomiting is pretty common. The other thing you can do if your baby is spitting up a lot or vomiting a lot is to slow them down with their eating a little bit. Take very frequent burping breaks. So let them eat for a minute, stop, burp them, another minute, stop, burp them. That can help get rid of some of the air that's happening. A lot of parents assume that babies are throwing up because they have an intolerance to their formula. Although this is possible, that's actually not the usual cause. So usually it's eating too fast, having too much air in their tummy, and or they can get the hiccups or cough, and that causes them to regurgitate. Babies reflux very commonly. Their esophagus, so the milk goes down into the stomach, and there's a little muscle that keeps the milk from coming back up. And in some babies, that muscle is just kind of weak or
Immature.
underdeveloped. Yeah, immature. And it takes a few weeks for it to really do its job and work well. And that's why you can see a lot of spitting up in the littlest guys. And so as they grow, often that decreases. So once they're a few months old, it's usually less common. But when they're small, they may throw up with every feeding a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we had our first child, and she was constantly having heartburn or spit up, and so much so that every time she lay down, she would cry. And so we actually had to have her sleep in her car seat in the crib, and that helped because it was angled or reclined. So
that can be dangerous if the baby flips the car seat forward. So it's the kind of thing that you would want to do carefully and make sure that you had the ability to monitor the baby while they were sleeping in their car seat. Also, sleeping in the car seat can be dangerous, especially if the baby's overheating. So you want to watch their temperature and also make sure that they're buckled in so that they can't turn or get tangled up in the padding.
You know, as we talk about these things that are happening in that 0 to 6 months, spitting up, you know, it seems like every time my sisters, we don't have any children, but my sister was, you know, they'd bring their kids over and they would feed them and then burp them, and it was just natural that they would not only burp, but they'd seem to be spitting up. And I don't know, maybe the first child, they were a little concerned, but after the first child, the second and third child, it was like no big deal. It's just part of the process. When we talk about those kind of things, what about, you know, we talked a little bit about this last week when, you know, you as a parent can seem to understand this baby talk and what your baby needs. But at the beginning, there's a, like we talk about a language, like the spitting up. That's a form of communication. What about things like where, you know, maybe their redness, maybe their discoloration in the face, or maybe there's a different type of bowel movement. Are there signs that we need to look at as a new parent and say, okay, this is normal. This is something I need to be aware of. This is something I need to take action on.
Yes.
Okay, so now the next question.
we can pick one of those topics and talk about it. So we can talk about pooping. Pooping is a really big deal for babies because it's one of the few things they do. So when your baby's first born, it's often common for you to keep track of how much they're pooping, especially those first few days. And people are often stunned by the quantity of diapers they are changing. So it's very common in that first few weeks to have that baby pooping 12 to 15 times a day, which, if you count it up, is pretty much every hour that you're awake. And so people can be, you know, a little startled by that. And also then it changes, and people worry that the fact that it changed is bad. So in general, and in a brand new baby, if your child is not having frequent stools, if they're having one or less stools a day, that's actually concerning, and you should talk to your pediatrician, especially if they haven't had any stool at all in that newborn period. Usually the hospital will not let you go home until the baby has had their first stool. And the reason for that is just to make sure that everything's working properly. And initially, their stool can be like really dark green or black even, and that's kind of a scary color, but that has to do with what's in the gut when the baby's still in the uterus. So
And it's really sticky, like
it's
tar.
sticky. It's very gross. So that first stool is called meconium, and it's that like dark green, black, sticky, thick. It just
It's hardly
it's
white.
horrible. Yeah, it gets everywhere. You can't clean it off. Luckily, that tends to go away after a few days, and you go to normal newborn stool, which the best way to describe it is CD mustard. It's like yellow, soft, sometimes even liquidy, but very mustard-like in consistency and color. And it looks like it has little seeds in it, which is interesting for people if they've never seen that. And then sometime after that, and it's probably in the next couple of months, things sort of get less frequent. You have the baby transitioning to maybe 3 or 4 stools a day, and the stool starts to firm up a little bit and get a little more brown. And this just has to do with the gut maturing. So the whole gastrointestinal system is starting to work better. It's your liver's starting to make more enzymes. There's all sorts of things happening in the baby that's resulting in a change in their stooling patterns. And at about 6 months, Between 4 and 6 months, people are also introducing solids, things like cereals and other foods, and all of those things can change the pattern. So, if people have questions about is this normal or not, it's really good to ask your doctor, because in a lot of illnesses you'll see a change in the stooling pattern, but these newborns and in that first year of life as an infant, you're constantly undergoing changing in those stooling patterns. And it's very common for a child to be constipated. But if you think that your child is having any pain with stooling or having a lot of abdominal cramping or pain, that's the time you really need to talk to your doctor, just to make sure that you're doing some things to help the gut along during that period.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in terms of letting you know that there's not much that the infant requires: sleep and interaction, and then hunger, and then pooping. So if your baby's crying, those are one of the probably the first, at least when I was a dad, newborn dad, those are, I was making sure I checked, okay, were we in the middle of nap time? Are they hungry? Is it feeding time? Or I check the diaper. And then when they let you know, I mean, I can remember clearly as the kids were growing up, you would see the poopy face. Okay, they're pooping. It's a poopy face, right? But as they're younger, you really do need to check more frequently, because a lot of newborns can get the diaper rash,
Yes.
sitting in that yellow mustardy seedy.
Stool has a very
Acidic, no?
I think it's alkalotic.
Is it alkalotic?
Yeah, it's a very alkalotic pH. So it basically burns the skin if it's sitting against the skin for too long. And so in this regard, there are some babies who will get a rash if they sit in a dirty diaper for 5 minutes. And that's really frustrating, because you can't always know when a baby has pooped, especially if they're sleeping. So it can be a little frustrating. Those babies need what I would call really proactive rash care, where you're keeping a thick layer of a barrier cream on their healthy skin, especially before bedtime, to make sure that you're sort of guarding against them developing that rash. Other babies seem to tolerate sitting around in a dirty diaper for a few minutes a little better. But if your child has sensitive skin, you often have to really be on that, or they'll break out in a rash. We've had both. We've had kids who, like if it was even 1 or 2 minutes, their skin would turn red. So we were really careful with that, and it takes extra time because you're constantly checking their diaper. That's fun.
Well, I think this is very helpful for that new parent out there, mom or dad, that starts to understand some of the stuff is just normal. And what you just mentioned there about diaper rash, it seems like that is always a common thing with parents, that it's really hard to avoid. But you said to use something as a barrier. What is that? What is that again?
Yeah. So you know how like the lifeguards have that thick white thing on their nose to protect the sun from getting in. There are some creams that are not dangerous for skin for newborns that you can buy that act exactly like that. It's just a physical barrier of this cream, so that if they have pooped, then it doesn't. You have a little bit more time to.
Yeah. So a barrier cream or diaper creams are commonly put on babies in the immediate time after you change their diaper. So you're changing the diaper, you clean them up, and then you put your diaper cream on. And there are some babies who need the extra strength version, and they need a thicker layer, and they need it every single time. Just an aside, we used to, back in the day, use powder. We used a lot of baby powder. And we no longer do that because the talc in the powder actually can cause lung problems. And so even in hospitals, we had to phase out gloves that had talc in them. We used to have powdered gloves to help get the gloves on. And now all the gloves in the hospitals are talc free. And it was because we recognized that our infants in the NICU were starting to have lung problems. So baby powder is out. We no longer use that on babies' butts. Instead, what we use is diaper cream. And these come, all the brand names are things that people are familiar with, like Desitin and Budo's butt cream. There's also, there's
A&D.
A&D ointment. And they all work the same, which is to sort of provide a waterproof layer to protect the skin from the urine or the stool. And so that's something that most new parents are too stingy with the amount that they use. And so just slap it on there and don't be shy.
Is this something that, as a new parent, that they can do this preventatively? Like, there are no signs of diaper rash, to go ahead and use it anyway? Are there any negative side effects of doing that?
Nope. In fact, that's the best way to go about it. Most new parents, I will say, probably don't use enough until their kid develops a rash the first time. And then you start to realize, oh, yeah, I really gotta cover the whole area, and with a thick enough layer that it works.
Gotcha.
So I just thought of a pro tip. So, Dr. Burris, this is a serious one. So, Dr. Burris mentioned that 12 to 14 times a day your baby's pooping. When you're changing your baby, whether it's for pee or poop, you don't want to just open the diaper and leave it there, because just because they pooped a minute ago doesn't mean it's not coming again, whether that's pee or poop. And depending on the gender, you might get pee in your face. You might get, we had our daughter, I made that mistake. It was 2 a.m. I was changing her, and I left the diaper open as I was cleaning, and she shot more poop up and over the diaper changing table onto the wall. So just always keep the diaper there. When you're ready, then you can wipe, and then that's just a pro tip if you don't want to suffer the consequences. So take it for what it's worth.
I tell you what, that reminds me of the Swiss cheese idea. That will be one we'll remember a long time. I think that I had a visual up and over onto the wall.
Yes.
Keep that diaper in place. But that's the reality of having a baby, right? That kind of stuff. Yeah, that kind of stuff happens. So
at 2 a.m, nonetheless, not at 2 p.m, right?
Right.
That's like having a flat tire on a desolate road. You don't want it to happen there. And no spare. So, well, first of all, thank you guys for so much information. Great takeaways. I love that whole idea about how often that the baby, a newborn, will go to the bathroom. And early on, the color and the smell and the texture will be that sticky tar. And that's normal as the gut begins to mature. And then it changes, and that's normal. The other thing I really liked about this is the fact that using preventative, I think so many times, and again, I'm not a parent, I'm guesstimating that we only close the door after the horses are out of the barn. And that whole thing about use this and use it generously, these barrier creams from the get-go, and the chances of your child now having diaper rash, which I can't even imagine how uncomfortable it'd be for a baby and a parent, but use it at the beginning. I thought those are 2 great tips. And of course, the final tip is keep that diaper in place till you're ready. Guys, you are the best. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming back here right after Thanksgiving. And, if you're seeing this and it's not live, like I said, this is a place where you can put questions in the comments, and Dr. Burris and Dr. Kim will respond to those. We'd love to hear your questions, things that maybe you're experiencing that we haven't talked about yet. And that would be content that we'll talk about on next week or the following week's show. Please share it with a parent, maybe a newborn mom and dad that maybe they're saying, I'm not sure where to go. This is a great place. 11:30 a.m. on Mondays. That's Pacific Standard Time. And because they can reach globally, no matter where they are in the world, you can get them 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Mondays. Guys, thank you so very much. I really appreciate being here. Before we go, I just want to mention that Dr. Burris and Dr. Kim have a wonderful program. It's called Coachella Valley Direct Primary Care. And I'm just going to put their information on the screen. And this is a place where, and I'm going to have them explain real quickly what it is and how is that different. And if you're a parent out there, Dr. Burris is a pediatrician, that this could be that great shift from the OBGYN to them as your primary care physician and your pediatrician. Dr. Burris, Dr. Kim, if you'll tell us just a little bit about your program.
Sure. I mean, our clinic was designed for the family of the Coachella Valley, and we wanted to create a place where it was somewhere where everyone felt like you were getting healthier. You had a place where if you didn't know what was going on, you could call and ask. And we felt that the current landscape of the healthcare system wasn't designed that way. It would be like having, a restaurant that you wanted to go to and you heard great things and you're like, no, I really like this place, but they had reservations out 6 weeks, and who would go to the places like that? And that's kind of like where the current healthcare system is. And so we decided to follow a model where you can come in the same day, next day, if you need to. And you might not necessarily need to, because we've addressed something over the phone or by text, and it was taken care of. And if you need to come in, you can come in. And it's a low affordable model, and we really do want a place where we feel like we're taking care of people and families, and they feel like their needs are getting met, and you're not running into 40 other kids that are sick, and so that's kind of what we decided to create.
Well, it is a great model. My wife and I are both members of your program. We just love it. We just know that you're always a text or a phone call away. And the fact that we don't have to physically come in, you didn't mention this, but you offer telemedicine, and that is very handy. I know a couple of times I've sent a picture in and said, hey, here's what this looks like. I'm not suggesting you as a a parent, take pictures of what's ever in the diaper and send it in. But I guess maybe that's not a bad idea, Dr. Burris.
No, we get a lot of diaper pics.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about diaper pics on Instagram until you just said it. It's like, hey, are you experiencing this color? It's okay. Call now, whatever it might be. But anyway, guys, before I get going down a slippery slope, I just want to thank you again. And information's on the screen. Coachella Valley Direct Primary Care. If you don't have a primary care physician, call them today and find out more about them. 760-642-5549, or just go to the website, CoachellaValleyDPC.com, and jump in as a member instead of what is currently known as our healthcare system. I guarantee you will never look back, and you will enjoy the experience. Until next week, my name is Jeff Harrison, along with
Dr. Burris
and Dr. Kim.
For your personal health, we're taking baby steps, helping those parents that have those kiddos that are on the way or they're 0 to 6 months understand, hey, what is the best role for them as a parent and to keep their babies healthy. Until next week, thank you so much. We'll see you then.